We're here on May 18th, I believe, and with Brad Avery, and you are the mayor of Newport Beach. Currently the mayor, and let's see, you became mayor just last year, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. After I was reelected to my second term in November, and then the city council put me in as mayor.
Okay. So tell me about your early background briefly, and you said you were born in Fullerton.
Right.
And I won't ask you what year, but and you came here. You moved to Newport Beach with your parents in 1969.
Right.
And so you were still in school then, I would assume.
Yes. So I went to Laguna Beach High.
Okay.
Went to elementary school at El Moro, and then in my junior year we moved up here.
And then where did you go to high school?
Harbor.
Oh, you went to Harbor. Okay.
So transferred to Harbor.
Yeah, I went there.
And I already had some friends from sailing there at Harbor.
Okay. And let's talk about sailing, because you had told me earlier that your parents kind of forced you to go sailing, and you didn't really, you just wanted to hang out with your friends or something?
Yeah, when you're 5 years old, it's sort of to be under your parents' foot.
Okay, so
all the time on a small boat.
So how old were you when you moved to Newport then? Or so you were in high school, so you were junior.
I was 17.
Okay, all right. You said you were born in Fullerton, and
yes.
And your family moved down here in 1969. I guess you were a child then, and
right.
And you said you moved to Laguna Beach first. So when did you move to Newport Beach?
1969.
Okay, and so you moved. So you were in Laguna before that then.
Right. So my family's originally from Pasadena.
Okay.
And they had my father had a temporary move to Fullerton, and my mother didn't like it, so they went back to Pasadena.
And then you came down to the beach. And so you ended up at Newport Harbor High School,
yes.
all the great people do. And that's good to know. And so from there, you said you were sailing early because your parents sort of forced you into the boat.
Right. My father was in the Navy and got out in World War II.
Okay.
World War II, and then a few years later, about 1951, bought a 44-foot island clipper sloop, which was built by Fellows and Stewart up in San Pedro. And so that was the first boat I sailed on, and I was 3 months old with my mother.
Okay.
Of course.
So were you already at the helm at that age, or?
Not quite. I was trimming the main sheet.
Okay. All right. And so then you grew up in town, and where did you go to college?
I went to Orange Coast College.
Okay.
But prior to going to Orange Coast College, I was so interested in sailing, and I was really not interested in going to college. So I saw that I could graduate early from Harbor High if I worked hard enough. And so I graduated midterm, and we had a family friend with a big 77-foot catch, and they were in Panama. And so they invited me to go with them as a crew member on their boat.
Okay.
They had a full-time crew. And so 5 days after graduating from Harbor High in February, I flew down to Panama and joined the boat there, and was gone basically for almost 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Serving on different boats, sailing across the Atlantic 4 times.
And then you came back and went to college.
I came back, went to Orange Coast College, left, did some sailing.
Did you get involved with a sailing program there?
No, I didn't. I was working quite a bit at the time. And then transferred to USC from Orange Coast College. So took basically all the units, 60 units, transferred to USC. And then graduated in 1980 with a degree in journalism communications.
Oh, okay.
And I was on the sailing team at USC.
Okay. And so after that, you came back to Newport, or did you live out of town for a while? Or because you mentioned that you had bought this house at a certain time,
right,
with your wife, and you wanted a good deal then in Newport Beach.
Well, the cheapest house in Newport Beach for sure. That was the main goal. So it was sort of
just to get in the city limits.
Right, $210,000.
I get it. Okay. And what year was that?
1985.
1985. And so you were married by then. And did you have kids or?
No kids.
Okay. And so then tell me a little more about how did you get involved in the city and in local affairs and what kind of things did you do in the 80s and 90s here in town?
Well, I graduated from USC with a degree in journalism. I was newly married, and my wife and I couldn't afford to live here in town, so we found a place above a garage in Santa Ana. It was actually pretty nice, in an area called French Park, and historic district. So we actually really liked it.
Yeah,
and
I know that area.
So we started a small business, and also I began working for Orange Coast College, teaching sailing. And so over a period of about 4 years, we saved our money and were able to come down and buy this place. And
so you didn't get involved with the sailing program there, but this is as a teacher.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
I was looking for part-time work, and I knew Dave Grant from when I went to Orange Coast College because I'd interviewed him in his position of dean of students for the school newspaper.
Okay.
And he asked me if I'd be interested in teaching part-time for the college. And so that was the start of a 42-year career with Orange Coast College. And so Prop 13 came through in 1978, which is right when I started. And the effects of Prop 13, basically devastating school budgets, started to really become apparent in 1981. And so the whole program that I was involved with, sailing on the bay here, teaching sailing, was shut down because there wasn't the funding. It was state funding that was paying for everything. So they basically went after all quote-unquote non-essential courses and shut them down and just focused on the true academics.
So how did that get started up again then?
Well, so then I realized that for me to continue my job, which was becoming more and more sort of shifting from part-time to more time, we needed to make money. So at that point, it was just students taking classes during the week. And so I started a program for the adult program and the community-based program for weekends. And we started charging money. So that began a cash flow situation. And then we had a couple of boats donated before I got there. And so then I just put a lot of effort into the boat donation program, which the eventual sales from the donated boats went into helping fund the program. And so within a few years, the program was largely self-funded. And then the last 35 years of my career there, that's what I was doing. A lot of it was fundraising.
So you didn't keep the boats and use them, you refurbished them and sold them?
We do a little of both.
Yeah, okay.
We keep and use them for a while and sell them, refurbish them and sell them. So it was, and this was all through the Orange Coast College's foundation. So the foundation owned the boats, people donated them to the nonprofit entity. The sailing program would use them, and then the proceeds went back into the sailing program, paid for salaries, paid for maintenance of the boats, all the rest of it. So it was really
So you turned that sort of in a little sort of an entrepreneurship then, it looks
absolutely,
like.
Absolutely, yeah. And I looked at it as a public-private partnership. The land where the sailing school is and the scout base next door, those are two parcels that are owned by Orange County.
Okay.
And so they're both the scouts and OCC are on rent-free leases there. So we had no rent, and the docks were there, and so the overhead was relatively low because we weren't paying for slip rent, and we were at that time there weren't any offices or classrooms. We were just teaching on the lawn, and so we were just working toward trying to stay sustainable by raising enough money and bringing enough money with the classes.
Okay, and moving a little forward, that recent construction there where they built the new building with the bridge, or did you have a lot to do with that, or?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. So over my career, I was involved in 4 fairly major construction projects there, because we built the classrooms above the rowing storage building, and I knew Dick Steele through boating, and so Dick and his wife Betty through the Steele Foundation supported our first new building, classroom building on top of the facility. So that was private money again, coming from the community to build school facilities. And that was through what they had then was the Harry and Grace Steele Foundation.
Are they the same Steeles that my sister used to go to Desert Sun School up in Idlewild, and they had a Richard Hamilton Steele gymnasium, because I guess the kid had gone there and had died or something.
Yes, that was his son, family? Ricky.
Okay, all right.
And he actually fell overboard off a yacht off San Francisco. It was really tragic.
Yeah, because
he was young too. He was probably in his late teens.
So I went there for summer camp, and I remember the gymnasium and pictures of the guy. Okay, the same guy. Okay, so then you built the classrooms, and then that was, what year was that?
1988, I think.
Okay. So this is a 30-year project of building all these buildings and everything. Of course, the new one is quite. I haven't been inside, but just looking at it from the highway with that bridge going over the highway was really cool. So
yeah, it's interesting how that came about. Okay. We started a program called the Professional Mariner Program, and this was a
professional what program?
Professional Mariner.
Mariner, okay.
For students who wanted careers in maritime industry. Okay. And so that started rolling, and we quickly realized that we were going to need more facilities, but we were sort of limited in the amount of land we had there, very confined. And then one day I saw a sign across Pacific Coast Highway that those 7 lots were for sale. And there was a boat dealership on one lot, and an antique gallery, and a little small office building, and then parking. And I knew Beverly Ray owned them, so Richard Ray bought those, or Bill Ray, was it? I'm trying to remember, owner of the Bay Club.
Well, I remember Beverly, but he died, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And so she was the one that.
So Beverly Ray owned the lots, and we went to her, and we tried to get a donation of the land, and that wasn't working.
Okay.
But and then we had no money to really purchase the land. We had some people that were interested in helping us if we got a deal going. But then the Orange County Sanitation District called me one day and said they were looking for a new site to build a new pump station to pump sewage up to Huntington Beach. As you know, there's seven pump stations in Newport Beach, and they have to renew them every 50 years. Well, the pump station that they were working with in that location was under the Balboa Bay Club, and it was built in 1937. So they were really looking for a place to build a new pump station. And so...
And what was the agency?
The Orange County Sanitation District.
Okay, sanitation. I should write that down.
Which I'm now on the board of, representing the city of Newport Beach. So it's come full circle here. And, they came to us and wanted to build a pump station under our facility. And I said, well, I don't think we'd want to do that, just because I was somewhat aware of the amount of disruption that would be involved with that for our program. And I suggested the 7 lots across the street. And they said, well, we only need 1 lot. And I said, well, we will partner with you. You buy all 7, and we'll do an MOU to buy the remaining 6 when you're done building your pump station. Okay. And at that point, it was totally speculative. From my point of view, it was just trying to make something happen. But
sounds pretty creative to me.
It ultimately, obviously, worked out.
Yeah.
So we ended up going from an MOU to, to a real deal. And so then we began doing some designing and figuring out, what the property and the land was, what it would yield for us in terms of the program. And there we got to where we are now with the building being finished and opening up in August.
You have the bridge there. I guess that's good, because you wouldn't want everybody running across the street all the time.
Right, right. But
was that hard to get through?
Well, I thought it would be impossible at the time. I didn't know anything about really Caltrans and all of that. So I asked to meet Don Webb, who was the public works director at the time. Don Webb came out, and we're standing on Coast Highway. And I said, Don, we'd like to put a crosswalk right here from our parking lot across the street to get kids to what will eventually be our new facility. And of course, that would require a signal. And Don just said flatly, well, we don't want to slow Coast Highway down. We're not going to give you a signal. And he said, but you could build a bridge. And I said, well, wouldn't Caltrans, object to that and be a problem? And he said, absolutely not. He said, you just build it to their specs and build it to their height, and it's totally possible. So that really kind of opened it up further, because we didn't like the idea of that was our only alternative, I thought, was to do a signal there.
Or a tunnel.
Or a tunnel, right, which has its own problems.
Yeah.
But certainly from a security standpoint, that's what we were trying to solve for students. Even a signal in a crosswalk is dangerous.
Yeah, especially there, yeah.
Right.
So that got done. Let's see, what year did you get involved in Newport Beach city politics? And how did that come about?
So being around the harbor so much, there were aspects of the harbor that I was interested in, and things that I thought might be good to change. So I applied for the Harbor Commission in probably 2009, and I didn't get it first time around, and then my application stayed on file, and then they had, it rotates, and there's another opening a year later, 2 years later. I'm not sure when that all happened, but I applied again, and the council appointed me to the Harbor Commission in 2011.
Okay.
So that was sort of my introduction to the city and the machinery and the politics and the rest of it. And so I was, at that point, had no interest in going to council. I just was focused on harbor issues. And, I had a full life. And then my friend Duffy got elected, Duffy Duffield. And so that drew me a little closer, because I knew Duffy, and Duffy would call me and ask me about things. He was sort of in the early days, checking around with folks to kind of get a sense of, what was going on and with council, and getting some advice. And so it's sort of you just gradually get drawn into this thing, or drawn into the swamp, if you will, of these things, and you're sort of aware of it, but then maybe not. And so Tony Petros was on council at that time, and then sort of suddenly, right at the end of the year, announced that he was not going to run for a second term. And Tony lives just down the street.
Okay.
And he's a great guy, and it really surprised me, because I thought he was doing a great job on council. But then Duffy called me, and he called me. I was in Cabo San Lucas at a place called The Office, which is a bar in the sand, and I'd had a couple of margaritas, and I was with my good friend Don Russell, and my wife Julie, and actually I got a text from Duffy saying, Tony Petros is not going to run, you need to run for city council. And sitting there on the beach, with a margarita in your hand, this is not something you're contemplating in the slightest. And so I showed the text to my friend Don Russell, and Don texted Duffy back saying, I'm in, with my phone. And so that's how I agreed to run for council.
That's a funny story. And so then, of course, I don't remember exactly that particular campaign, but I guess you had somebody who was the main candidates in that race.
I don't remember her name. There was a woman who ran, who only attended a few of the debates, quote unquote debates, and didn't raise any money.
Okay.
So and she was very nice, and I spoke with her several times. So I really didn't have an opponent of any consequence.
So you easily won that one, and then
Yes.
that was your first term, and then this is you're in your second term now.
Right.
So it's a 4-year term, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess you guys are term limited though after 2 terms.
Yes, and wisely so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a bit debatable issue, but okay. So what's it been like being on the council? I mean, I'm sure you get a little bit of pushback from some people and encouragement from others, and a few disagreements amongst you guys once in a while. But how does that work, and how have you dealt with that?
It is a transformation. You know, you get on the council, and I wasn't a wonk. You know, I'm not a council wonk. And I sort of like to say, and I guess all politicians say this, you know, I'm just someone who lives in District 2 who ended up really by accident, right? I mean, I wasn't looking for it. Tony Petros resigned, and, you know, Duffy encouraged me to run. And but nonetheless, I was fully engaged with the Harbor Commission, and the council I have found to be totally engaging. So it's very interesting. It's not always enjoyable. So, you know, it's a curious mix of things. And I think every council person asks themselves from time to time, why am I doing this? You know, particularly after a tough meeting, or you get an email from someone that's just not very kind at all. And I would say that probably the toughest times for me have been really during this homeless situation, particularly early on, when people would come into the council meeting and, you know, just demand that the homeless be removed from the streets, and they didn't care what happened to them. They just didn't want them around, you know. And of course, as you get into these things, you find out everything's complicated. There aren't really many simple answers. And, you know, you're trying to solve for what's right for the city, what's the will of the majority. And it's just not always easy. And sometimes you find yourself voting for things that you don't like, but you realize, given the situation, it's the best alternative.
I heard the story, this was years ago, that the police used to pick up homeless people and take them to Costa Mesa.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I don't know how true it is or how often that happened. But yeah, I mean, just in the short time I've been on council, 6 years, you know, society has really changed. I mean, there's been some major societal changes, and it filters down here too. Whatever's going on in the outside world, it happens here too. So our discourse has gotten a little rougher, and so that's happened here too, in my view.
Well, I remember driving through LA one time, and just the whole block was just covered with people in tents, and that. And haven't really seen that here.
Right.
Do you have a number about how many estimated homeless people there are in Newport Beach?
I would say between 40 and 60.
Okay.
And we have 2 people that work full time with the homeless situation.
Okay. And what are they doing? I mean,
well, Cynthia Carter is full time with the police department. She's an officer, and she's the homeless liaison for the police department. And then Natalie Basmagian works full time for the city, and she is full time on the working with people who are experiencing homelessness. So between the 2, they know all of our homeless by name. They know their situation, whether it's addiction, whether it's just being evicted, whether it's a mental health issue, and they're working all the time with them to gain their trust, to try and get them to get to a shelter, try and get them to permanent supportive housing. So, and it's important that people understand that, you know, that we are working at it, but we have to also work within the law. And even though we've now got shelter beds in Costa Mesa, you know, due to our partnership with Costa Mesa, we have 20 beds, and I believe we have at least half of them with people in them now, and getting the services they need, you know, whether it's addiction, help with their addictions, whether it's mental health, whether it's aid to get into a better housing situation. So those are the things that are happening every day in this town that we're working on. It takes an extraordinarily amount of work, and that's why you see all the tents in LA, because we've just got 40 to 60. Yeah. You can imagine it's an enormous problem because you can't just unilaterally just take people and move them somewhere. They've got rights. Someone can spend the day in a park, and whether they're a wealthy person or someone who's homeless, they both have the same rights to be there. And so some people don't understand that. And it's important to understand that.
On the brighter side, what are some of the fun things you get to deal with?
There aren't that many.
Marching in parades or just dedicating new buildings, or as mayor, you're sort of the show person for the whole city for when something important or event worthy happens. So tell me about that a little bit.
Well, I think
of course this year's been tough, but
this year has been tough, but there are lots of high points that come along. But they are revolving around just successes that we have. A new fire station is always fun. So opening the Corona del Mar Fribrary was, always great. Anytime we can get a win for an individual who's seeking a little help from council, a business owner that's got to struggle with a permitting situation, we have the ability to maybe try and help nudge that along and try and solve an issue. So those onesie twosies, kind of happen, and then implementing policy that you feel good about is great.
Now, I know former Mayor Dixon recently ran for the assembly and she didn't make it. Do you have any upward plans after Newport Beach to run for state office or anything like
whatsoever.
That?
No. I think given the setup at the state level, it compared to being at the city where you can actually get some things done, if you can persuade 3 other council members to go along with you or just join with them, you can really do positive things for the city and for folks. And that's something you cannot do up in Sacramento.
There's 120 of them up there, I guess.
Well, right, and if you're in the wrong political party, I'm a Republican. Well, if you're up there and you're working against Democrats who want to take local control away from cities, you're in a tough spot.
Well, speaking of that, do you think that, supposedly the council is nonpartisan,
right?
But a lot of people in Newport Beach are Republicans. Do you find partisanship in the city council meetings very much, or is it pretty much?
No, I don't.
Not there. So
no, I think this council in particular now, in my view, and I'm speaking strictly for myself, is really doing a good job, and we know each other. We know each other's. And I wouldn't say it's more political. It's more a framework of conservatism in terms of mainly fiscal. So budget items, and you're sort of how much money does the city participate in the new lifeguard headquarters? As opposed to the nonprofit, and can we afford to build some great civic buildings? Like Marina Park was controversial. Did we overspend there? Some people think no, some people think yes. So those kinds of things will split the council because there are people who are a little more fiscally conservative. Others see it as, this is an opportunity to, create a great public facility or beautify the community. How much money do we spend on, making Corona del Mar look great, or putting in medians down, the Balboa Peninsula, and putting in palm trees and making it all look nice. So it's balancing all that is really Newport's fortunate. We have a huge, tax base on property taxes, and that's our anchor fiscally. So, but that doesn't mean you just spend money wildly. So the council really goes over these issues quite extensively, and I think we end up most of the time in a really good spot that represents sort of our community, and that's what we should be doing. So if you look across our community, you've got some people that are just, they don't want to spend a nickel, and others, they would be building new facilities all the time.
It's been said in the past, not necessarily against this council, but because of the influence of big developers and the money they donate to you guys, that you guys are just doing what, say, the Irvine Company wants to do or whatever. I mean, how would you respond to that?
It's funny to hear that, right?
Well, I've heard it for 30 years. So.
Right. So, I don't find that to be true. Mm-hmm. Certainly developers have influence, and they lobby individual council members when there's a new project coming up. Mm-hmm. And but I just can't imagine that lobbying or $1,000 campaign contribution changing, making you vote for something you wouldn't have otherwise. It's just sort of, to me, not a rational thought. The real problem, in my view, is when we do the general plan, that's what's really messed us up, in my view, in terms of, I think there's a little too much square footage being built in Newport. And now we have the state that's mandating, 4,800 housing units. So we don't even have a say over that. We've got a zone for it and hope private landowners agree to build some of it to get us to meet our quota. And so that's just taken out of our hands. But in the general plan, and we've got to go back several general plans. They usually, every 7 years or so, we do a new general plan. And the public gets involved with that. And the public ultimately has to vote for it. And what I think's happened over time is the public is not aware, when they're voting for the general plan, of the eventual impacts. So when we talk about, areas of growth and everything that's in that general plan, it's because of that. So if the Mariners Mile area down here, where we've got some controversy now over what's going to be built there, that was all set up by previous votes on previous general plans. So the amount of square footage and the heights and everything has been set years ago. So, and you could argue the heights are too high, the density is too great, but that's something that's locked in because of the general plan. That's what's allowable in that particular zone.
So they have to allow them, huh?
Yeah. Or find yourself in court, right? That's what we call property rights.
Yeah. So, do you have anything else that you would like to say about life in Newport, or any hopes for the future for the city, or to kind of wrap things up here? What legacy would you like to leave as mayor of this city?
I don't have any, legacy thoughts. It's more just I look at it as my turn to contribute, and so that's what I'm looking at. And I think I feel like since I've been on council, we've done, the vast majority of things we've done, I think, greatly benefit the city. So I think the council's responsibly moved the city forward. And I think the future, obviously, is it couldn't be brighter. It's an exceptional town, and we have exceptional residents, because it's a tough town to get into. It's a tough town to buy your way into. And one of the issues we have are the children of my contemporaries, and trying to move back to Newport and be able to afford it. And we talk about this new building, we talk about affordable housing, and the state's basically telling us to build 4,500 units. We think, who's going to live there? Well, a lot of them will be low income, moderate income, and those will be places that people who want to, young folks that want to return to Newport or move out of their house, move out from their parents and have a job and have their first apartment
Yeah.
These will be those kinds of places because they will be mandated low rent. So that's important to understand. So, about 2,000 units will be like this, low to moderate. And so I look at all that as a positive aspect of it. I certainly don't like the state telling Newport Beach it's got to build 4,800 units because we've got to do it on a very tight timeline, and it makes planning very difficult. So those are the challenges that's one of the major challenges we're facing, is to roll this out, this zoning, and ultimately the building of all this housing in a way that is good. We wind up with housing product that people want to live in, that has access to parks where kids can play. There's access to restaurants and activities right there. They're not having to get in their car and go to somewhere else, and that's going to be a tough thing to do.
Okay, I like the idea of having a place for your kids to come move to and afford it, but how do people differentiate between, say, those people who might be, say, more desirable than somebody from, say, Riverside who wants to come live here and get in line with the rest of those?
You're obviously it's going to be open to everybody, and it's just like anytime you apply to rent a house.
Yeah.
So, and there's all the laws in terms of discrimination. So it's an open market at that point for that housing. Mm-hmm. But to circle back to your question, just as I have done, but anyone who's bought a house in Newport, and anyone who's come from wherever and just maybe bought an investment property, I don't think there's a better place in the country where you can buy real estate, and it's not only a safe investment, you're on an escalator, in terms of upward values. Because the city, in my view, is so well run and has such an anchor of income to make it all work, and is responsibly managed. Our bond rating is the best you can get, and so it's just a very safe investment. So, and this is, frankly, I think a lot of this Airbnb purchases of houses and people doing Airbnbs, they can't afford it, but if they buy a house on the Balboa Peninsula and they turn it into an Airbnb, it gets them started. And so that's an important thing.
I'm hoping maybe they'll move in later and be permanent.
Right, exactly. Yeah, or they can split it, they've got a rental there. So that's something that you don't hear a lot about, but I think just based on my talking to folks and listening to people saying that, and more, I've heard from a number of people saying the only way we could buy into Newport Beach is to buy a duplex or a triplex, or do an Airbnb situation with this house while we're both working, and then eventually we retire in Newport Beach.
Well, let me ask you this. I was at a meeting once not too long ago, and Diane Dixon was there, and she was talking about this mandate and basically painting it in very dark context, and that they would end up, the Balboa Peninsula would look like Miami Beach in a generation with tall skyscrapers.
I don't think so.
Is that a real threat, or could, say, a person buy a lot, maybe 2 or 3 lots, and build a 10 foot or 10-story building next to some little bungalows that have been there 100 years? Is that something that's going to really happen, or could happen, or?
It depends on the. The future that far out. But I'm saying in the near term, in a generation, I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. But I think every day we're adding more square footage in Newport Beach, a lot more square footage, commercial, residential. It's just happening. People doing remodels. Every house on this street, all these houses on this street were 1,200 square feet when they were first built. And now the house next door is almost 6,000 square feet.
Wow.
And no one buys a lot without building the biggest house they can put on it because of the economics. So that creates, issues for neighbors and quality of life issues. But it's just, that's part of this. And so it's really important to is to accept it. That's what's happening. So that eventually, yes, things will get more dense. There'll be less air and light for homes on Balboa Island over time. Because as they get sections of those giant boxes that go up 3 stories high, it just starts to block things out. But that does not diminish demand.
Yeah.
Just as the airport doesn't diminish demand.
Okay, well, any last comments then?
Thank you so much.
I guess we're done. Well, thank you
great
very much. This is Leonard Davis interviewing Mayor Brad Avery of Newport Beach and for our oral history project. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you.